About to go live. Thanks for ready to go.
The more I would say, I went to Colorado
Good afternoon, everyone. Hello, we're about to get started. Thank you so much for being here. It's incredible to be here in this beautiful part of our great nation. My name is Janessa Goldbeck. I'm the CEO of Vet Voice Foundation, which is a national 501c3 nonprofit that works to elevate the voices of veterans in our democracy. And we have been a partner in this initiative to protect Camp Hale for many years. Many of you may know my former colleague Garrett, who was part of some of the crew out here who started thinking about how to make this a reality. A few years ago, I was out in Colorado near Garden of the Gods, and Garrett was telling me about this campaign, and I cannot tell you what an honor and a privilege it is to be here just a few years later. And I know that it feels like a long time, but in the pace of national monument campaigns, it's so exciting to see where we're at. So before we get started, I just want to thank Jen Mason, the museum director and Vale Town Council member. I want to thank Francis Levitt, our 10th Mountain Division Camp Hale veteran. Francis, thank you so much for being here. It is such an honor to have you with us. I also want to thank Bradley Noon, another 10th Mountain Combat veteran and independent public lands advocate. Julie Suter, representing Congressman Joe Negus's office. Thank you, Julie, for being here. John Whitney, representing Senator Bennett's office. Thanks for being here. A big shout out to Nancy Kramer, our president of the 10th Mountain Foundation. Yeah, raise your hand. Thank you. I want to thank State Senator and Senate President Pro Tem Carrie Donovan for being here with us today. I want to thank State Senator Faith Winter for being here as well. Thank you, Faith. Thank you to State Representative Matt Gray for being in attendance. Thank you so much to Kathy Chandler Henry, an Eagle County Commissioner who's here and has been a staunch advocate. Nice to see you, Kathy. Also, thanks to Jeannie McQueenie, Eagle County Commissioner. That is a great name. And Matt Schur, I'm not sure if he's here, but our other Eagle County Commissioner as well. Oh,
and Dylan Roberts.
And Dylan, thank you so much for being here. Dylan Roberts, State Representative, thank you so much. And finally, Pat Hammond, our Eagle County Veteran Services Officer and U.S. Army Nurse Corps. Brad Noon. Yep, I think I gave him a shout out already. We've got so many advocates here, which is such a wonderful example of how much community support this initiative has. Few places really embody the true connection between veterans and our nation's public lands more than Camp Hale. Camp Hale was originally used as a cold weather training area for the U.S. Army during World War II. Following the war, veterans who trained at Camp Hale, particularly veterans of the Army's 10th Mountain Division, helped launch the ski industry and modern outdoor recreation economy of Colorado. Furthermore, Camp Hale has become a treasured spot for reflection, reunion, and recreation for veterans and non-veterans alike. But it is under threat, which is why myself, along with fellow veterans and military family members, are urging President Biden to permanently protect this awe-inspiring and culturally significant landscape. The Camp Hale Continental Divide National Monument would be made up of two areas, Camp Hale and the 10-mile range, that Colorado's congressional delegation has been working to protect for years. Camp Hale played a vital role in the training of the 10th Mountain Division for Alpine warfare during World War II, as well as the birth of the ski economy. 10-mile range was central to Camp Hale's training regiments. It also includes Quandary Peak, one of the most climbed and famed 14ers in Colorado, and a section of the Continental Divide, the geological boundary along the Rocky Mountains separating the eastern and western watersheds of the United States. The Colorado Outdoor Recreation and Economy Act, or the CORE Act, which includes protections of these areas and more, has passed the House of Representatives 5 times, but unfortunately has been stalled in the Senate over the last several Congresses, despite the support of both of Colorado's senators. And thank you for that, to both of those senators. Thank you, Senator Bennett and Senator Inkovich, for your support. While we continue to work with lead sponsors, Senator Bennett and Representative Neguse, to pass the entirety of the protections included in the bill, it's vital that the President acts immediately to protect the areas within the proposed Camp Hale Continental Divide National Monument, to honor the surviving members of our 10th Mountain Division World War II veterans, and to protect the area for future generations of Coloradans and Americans alike. Mr. President, we ask you for your leadership in protecting the Thompson Divide from further development and securing protections for the Grand Mesa and Gunnison National Forests. Mr. President, as you move to implement your conservation goals outlined in the America the Beautiful initiative, we ask that you designate Camp Hale Continental Divide as a national monument using the powers invested in you by the Antiquities Act. This action will continue a long-standing tradition of bipartisan support for protecting our nation's most special places, historic landmarks, and objects of historic and scientific interest, while responding to the community-led desires to protect our public lands. We also hope that this action will pave the way for additional bold actions by your administration to permanently protect our treasured lands. Thank you all for being here today. It is my honor now to turn the mic over to Nancy Kramer.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for being here, and thank you for this glorious day. And what it was a treat to be at Camp Hale on such a glorious day. I come with a bit of a heavy heart today. My good friend and vet, 10th Mountain veteran, who would have turned 99 in November, Crosby Perry Smith, passed away in Steamboat Springs yesterday. But it also, with that heavy heart, there's also a renewed sense of urgency and excitement that I have about what we're doing here. So, this is the right time. This is the right place. It is the right thing to do. To honor the legacy of the 10th Mountain Division, a legacy bestowed on descendants, the modern 10th Division Light Infantry, which is the most deployed division in our country, and they have done an amazing job of securing our freedom through their heavy lift in Afghanistan, Iraq. So thank you, and Brad, thank you for your service. This legacy is also a legacy that influenced the emergence of the outdoor recreation industry throughout our country, that today provides over 7.5 million jobs and generates over $125 billion in federal, state, and local tax revenues. All of this founded out of a love of the outdoors in the mountains and ignited by duty, honor, and country. There is no greater criterion or values that can weigh in favor of establishing this uniquely American monument. With that, the Camp Hale Continental Divide National Monument will not just honor the people, heritage, and landscape of this special place. It is the significant designation that will allow us, the foundation, to raise awareness of this lesser-known military story of American courage. Furthermore, it will allow us to produce effective on-site interpretive programs and projects, invest in active service and veteran programs that inspire new careers and legacies in both the military and the outdoor recreation industries. To this end, Mr. President, your action to establish the Camp Hale Continental Divide National Monument will leverage positive educational, cultural, and economic impact within Colorado and throughout our great country. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nancy. Next up is, it is my great honor to introduce Francis Lovett, our 10th Mountain Division veteran.
Straight ahead.
Full steam ahead.
Steam ahead. Sempre avanti.
Yeah, sempre avanti.
No arms.
No arms.
Okay.
You got it.
That was something I didn't want to say.
Excuse me.
All mics?
Yes.
Oh, you do.
All right.
Why am I here? People have just said they're honored to have me here. I'm honored to be here. The cause is something close to my heart, and my heart's in pretty good shape, considering last July I turned 100. Mind you, I didn't do that unassisted. There were, in my lineage, numbers of long-lived people. My sister died recently at 102. My Aunt Peg, 2 weeks short of 100, and they say she was mad as hell because she didn't make it. And my mother was in her upper 90s, and a whole flock of Irish relatives in their upper 80s and kicking 90. So I didn't earn these genes, I was given them. And I have to say I'm quite happy. Now, I was at Camp Hale shortly after it began. It was quite a place. I remember the first time I saw it, I looked down from the gate where the guard was and saw what looked like a whole village, and it was. And it became home to so many of us. We were, all of us, interested in the outdoors, because in order to become a member of the 10th Mountain Division, originally we had to have 3 letters attesting to our skill as a skier or a climber or someone with extensive outdoor living experience. Now, the college ski teams were mostly in New England, and they emptied into the National Ski Patrol's repository of letters because the Army at that time didn't give a hoot about mountain troops. They told Minnie Dole, if you want them, you've got to recruit them. So the 10th Mountain Division originally was recruited not by the military, but by the National Ski Patrol. And they gave us our letter of acceptance if we had the right sponsors. And that letter we presented to bewildered people in places like Fort Devens in Massachusetts, where they were puzzled. You can't know where you're going. It's a war, you know. So you mustn't tell anybody. You don't know where you're going, do you? Yes, we all knew we were going to a place called Camp Hale out in Colorado, but we couldn't tell anybody, and we were assured we didn't know that. And it took 7 of us from that aspect of New England numbers of days to get there, because I remember coming into Colorado, my first view was through the Royal Gorge, and I remembered passing a sign that said Texarkana. So we were rooted all over the place before we got to Camp Hale. When we got there, it was, to me, an astounding place. It felt, because of my love of the outdoors, like home, and yet it was entirely strange, full of people all dressed alike, every one of them wishing that he hadn't had to leave college, because 90% of us then were college students coming in. And being actively homesick, once you cross the Mississippi River, if you're from New England, you know you're on the frontier. So I remember I did a lot of easy climbing out east, easy after I got back from being a member of the 10th Mountain Division. But with my Aunt Tess, who'd been an Irish hill walker and was determined that I'd know what it was like to stand on high places. Well, they aren't terribly high in New England, but I stood there when I was a kid and went with her to a couple of climbs in Connecticut quarries that had been abandoned. That's where I began technical climbing. But I got a telegram from her when I got to Camp Hale the second day I was there, and the telegram said, "You are now in real mountains. Respect them." And I learned how right she was, because if there's one thing I developed out of my love of the outdoors, it was great respect for mountains. They are at once inviting and unforgiving. They are full of the most marvelous things to see once you walk the top of the world. And I've stood on the top of numbers of high places in Colorado and in the Alps and in eastern mountains. And since I've lost my sight, it has been to me a joy to be able to remember so many wonderful things that I saw, especially out here. I remember I climbed on Homestake, and I was there for the first snowfall, and I was marveling at the sounds. The ptarmigan, I could hear them croon, and there were wildflowers still at the edge of where the snow had ceased. And that kind of thing, you know, a fellow with half a heart, it's something you cannot forget. And I am convinced that my experience here at Camp Hale and in the living out in these hills, even including that infamous D series where we lived 5 weeks out in a snowstorm, which blew sideways and never stopped. I remember there were numbers of my friends who decided after we'd fought a while in Italy that D series had been worse than combat. The only difference was here they didn't shoot real bullets at us. But otherwise, they showed no mercy. I learned what it's like to breathe. This altitude, 90 pounds of rucksack, and troop leaders with no mercy. You learn, you become conditioned, such as I'd never been conditioned. When I came out here, I was fresh off an undefeated season in our wrestling team, and I thought I was in good condition. Well, I learned And I became so conditioned that I believe truly I've not lost it. I didn't have to determine that I wouldn't become pear-shaped as I grew older, or that I would have to use suspenders instead of belts, and so on. I've kept myself in good physical condition because I never really fell out of it. And that is one of the things that too few people now know, is the wonderful conditioning that the outdoors, particularly uphill outdoors, gives you. I think it's so important that this Camp Hale and environs become made a national monument, because there's true music here. Among my academic accomplishments, music was one of them. And I swear to you that I know what it is like to hear that silly song, "The Hills Are Alive with the Sound of Music." It's silly, but it's true. There's a quality of organ music when you sleep out overnight here. I would like it to be protected so that those who are enough interested in living outside the boxes, that they hear that music. I would like your applause reminds me, that's what people do when you finish. I don't know whether I'm getting a hint, but I can tell you this. Your reception has been so warm that I'm thinking seriously of running for office. May I tell you that nepotism, graduate from my class in federal prison. But the purpose of this meeting is to persuade President Biden to pick up his pen and, for God's sake, sign. I probably have no influence at all with him, nor with most of his staff. If I have, and I forgot I knew Senator Bennett's father. He was president of Wesley, and so it goes. But how do I persuade one man? I can't. But I can join you. I can write. I can speak. I can do anything that will persuade anybody in high place to urge this forward. It's important. And it's vital because it's part of history, and history has an unhappy way with the generations of repeating itself, and people seem to expect different results from the same thing. And I worry today, right now, about what's happening in the world, not just here, but its repetition. When I was a kid, land was a couple of dollars an acre. Well, if there's any left at the end of this, I call it hysteria of building in this country, because your range is disappearing at a formidable rate, and so it is in other parts of the country. Land, water, those important things are disappearing. And people keep saying, well, not in my generation. Down the road, they'll solve it. It's important that you get this protected now. And whatever you do in your offices, I wish you well. I hope to God that somebody in high place listens to an old guy who was there and knows the value of what you have in this 10-mile circuit. So, all the best to you, and an urgent message to President Biden, for Pete's sake, pay attention and sign. Okay.
Let's give another round of applause for Francis. Next up, I'm honored to welcome to the podium our state representative and state senate candidate, Dylan Roberts.
All right, thank you, everybody. And that is certainly an impossible speaker to follow, so I won't be very long. But thank you all for being here. Thank you to everybody who helped organize today, but everybody who's been working on this for years. This has been a very long effort to help protect Camp Hale and our beautiful public lands here in Eagle County. I have the honor of serving as the state representative for Eagle County, and am very honored to be here today to urge to join the call to President Biden to help protect Camp Hale and the surrounding areas. Of course, because of its value for our veterans and all the veterans who have served there and trained there, and what it means for this community, but also because of what this means for our economy. Our economy here in Eagle County and in Colorado depends on the outdoor recreation industry, and protecting these lands will be a major boost to the already $4.8 billion a year outdoor recreation economy that we have here in Colorado. This is good for our economy, for hundreds of businesses in this region, if we can protect these lands. And we know that they have so much meaning and so much support from local officials across the political spectrum. And so a big shout out to Senator Bennett, who's been working on this for years, who's gotten us here today, and Senator Hickenlooper and Congressman Neguse, who have helped push it this far. I'm here to join the call with all of my colleagues and local leaders to President Biden. Please protect Camp Hale. Do what you can. Pick up that pen, as the gentleman said, and sign it for Pete's sake. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. And I apologize, I jumped my itinerary here. I'm now honored to bring up to the stage our state senator and state president pro tem, Carrie Donovan.
Thank you.
Luckily, Dylan and I do this a lot together, so it doesn't matter. We're like kind of a uniform team. Anyways, it's great to see so many people here, and what inspiring words from someone who trained and saw this land as it was envisioned by the Army. I come to you today with kind of two hats on. One, as serving in my final year as the senator for the 7 counties of this area whose public lands are our heartbeat and our soul, but also as the granddaughter of William Byrd Mounsey, who was trained in Camp Hale, and then what he called in the infinite wisdom of the Army was then deployed to the South Pacific after training in the snow in the mountains. But he came back from the trials and horrors of World War II and found solace in the wilderness of Colorado. It was a place he felt safe, and it was a place that he knew. And because of that experience, he immediately waded into the wilderness fight of the early 60s and was a lead citizen on establishing the Wilderness Act. What is key in the Wilderness Act and what is key in public lands is that they are one of the most American ideals. Nowhere else in the world has this concept of public lands. Nowhere else in this world has this idea of wilderness that is driven from citizens. The very foundation of wilderness is it has to be a citizen initiative act. And that's where we stand here today. But years ago, the idea of preserving these lands for generations that we will never know came from the citizens who call this home. And the other beauty of public lands is they embody the absolute freedom and the absolute democracy and the things that the soldiers that trained in Camp Hale fought for, because they belong to everyone. You do not need to be a descendant from royalty to access them. You do not have to buy a ticket, right? You just have to know that they belong to each and every one of us. And so what is remarkable and important about asking President Biden today to protect these lands with the very, very important designation of being a monument is so that they can continue to inspire generations. My grandfather was inspired by training in the mountains to come back and fight for wilderness. The ski resort in this remarkable town that I call home and grew up in was founded by, and the ski industry across this country, by that greatest generation that came back from World War II and fought for things that they believe in. And we can only hope that this inspired land can continue to do that, but only if we protect it. And the other wonderful thing about Camp Hale, as my grandfather talked about, as any veteran who experienced it, yes, the Army has a map of what Camp Hale was. But Camp Hale was more than the commissary and the barracks. It was the mountains and landscapes that surrounded it, because that's what turned men into soldiers. Without those men, without those mountains, without those landscapes, without those valleys, without the alpine meadows, without the golden aspens, without the roaring creeks, without the snowfields, without the cornices, you cannot take a man who volunteers and turn him into that winter warfare soldier to go march up Riva Ridge. So yes, Camp Hale is some squares on a map, but really the true and the spirit and the backbone of what turned these men into soldiers that then went and fought World War II was the surrounding landscapes. And that's what can be captured in this act of President Biden that makes it a little bit different than how we talk about some other areas. So I so appreciate the work of Senator Bennett and his incredible staff that has pushed this idea forward in a record-breaking amount of time. And thank you for everyone who is part of this Climb to Glory family, a part of this 10th Mountain Division, part of the Winter Soldier, part of this wilderness movement, because this is a citizens-driven effort. I'm proud as an elected to try to carry some of that citizens' voice forward. And on behalf of my grandfather who found more home in wilderness, more recovery in wilderness, I hope that the next time we all join together, we can talk about the monument and not about the act to make it a monument. Thank you so much.
Next up, I have Eagle County Commissioner Kathy Chandler Henry.
Thanks, Janessa. Carrie, what inspiring and awesome words. Thank you. Thanks, everyone, for being here. Happy Public Lands Day. I mean, is this gorgeous or what? It's such a treat to be here. I have to start out by giving a shout out to Senator Michael Bennett, to Congressman Neguse, and to Senator Hickenlooper for being such advocates for stewardship of our public lands. Congressman Neguse has pushed this through the House 5 times for passage, and Senator Bennett has just been the heart and soul. He and his staff, and John Whitney's here today, have been the drumbeat to keep this going year after year after year and provide us hope and optimism that we can protect these lands. Our community groups appreciate these lands, the diverse stakeholders that have come together over more than a decade and come to agreement on the CORE Act, know how valuable these lands are to all of us. And we're here today to celebrate the portions of the CORE Act that make up the National Monument, the 10-mile range, Camp Hale, and the Continental Divide lands. My fellow commissioners, Jeannie McQueenie and Matt Schur, our partners in Summit County, Tamara Pope, Elizabeth Lawrence, and Josh Blanchard, all stand together to try and make this a reality. We know locally and throughout the state how important these public lands are to us. In fact, a recent poll from Western Priority shows 86% of Coloradans support this national monument. These are special places, as we've heard today from so many voices. They're our heritage, they're our heart and our soul. They're accessible to all of us, and they are just full of biodiversity and cultural relevance. They need protection, though. As Dylan Roberts mentioned, they are our economy. Our economy is based on outdoor recreation. We are one of the most visited national forests in the whole country, and we need help to protect these lands. We'll get that help through the CORE Act. Eagle and Summit counties will be so proud to have this national monument in our backyard, and we're honored to be home to the treasures that the whole world, the whole country can enjoy for generations to come. So, President Biden, pick up that pen, make us all proud. Thank you.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, that concludes the press portion of this event. I want to thank the Colorado Snow Sports Museum for hosting us. Can we give them a round of applause? And I want to encourage everyone who's here, as well as those who may be watching at home tonight or on the internet, to please sign the petition to President Biden to designate Camp Hale Continental Divide National Monument using the Antiquities Act as soon as possible. If you haven't yet signed our petition, please do so at the table in the back. Please tweet, use the hashtag Camp Hale. There's some QR codes back there that you can scan to get you directly to the petition online. It's really important that we push this through, and I think we're getting very close. So thank you all for being out here today. We appreciate you so much, and thanks to all of our wonderful speakers.
Bravo!
Get our folks up here, yeah, all of our speakers and guests.
Oh, right. Oh, yeah. Yeah.